Mr. Harris, you once said truth can be dull, but today I'd prefer if we try to make murky truth gleam a little rather than go for even colourful lies. How's that for a how are you? I'm a lifelong fan. It's great to meet you. Greeting to Richard Harris. Cool, eh? No, stupid, potentially. Either way, on October the 10th, 1987, that is precisely what I said to the man when we met in his suite at Dublin's Berkeley Court Hotel to do our first interview. It's a wonder Richard didn't smack me in the gob at one point. I felt he might. But first, let's set the scene re Harris's career at the time. He was born in Limerick, Ireland in 1930, which made him 57 years old, although tellingly and maybe even characteristically, Harris had lied about his age since moving to London to become an actor in the mid-50s and said he was born in 1933. As for his career in 87, it was, put bluntly, dead and nearly buried. At least according to many money people in the movie business, some of whom no doubt even reckoned that Richard himself had probably died from alcohol abuse or was at least too much of a drunk to be employable. Not that Harris needed the cash. Earlier that decade, he'd set himself up for life by purchasing the rights to and touring Camelot. But his most recent movie in 1985, Martin's Day, hadn't even made it onto video. And here in Ireland, 2 years later, we were more used to seeing him hype duty-free booze in ads for Shannon Airport. The man had no shame. But the truth is that back in 1981, while filming Tarzan the Ape Man, Richard noted in his diary that he was counting the days until the end of the shoot, and that this was a far cry from those days earlier in his career when he hoped that a film shoot would go on forever. This made Harris realise he'd lost his faith in making movies. Not that I knew that in 1987, on the contrary. When I suggested that that slice of soft porn starring Bo Derek was a long way down the cinematic vine from This Sporting Life, the masterpiece that gave Harris his break nearly 20 years earlier, he again lied and said he totally enjoyed making Tarzan. But how did he respond to my "let's make dull truth gleam a little" comment or conceit?
Is that what I said?
No, I'm saying that.
Oh,
Does it sound like you?
oh, it sounds very pretentious.
Does it?
But however, carry on. You do, not I do. You do anything you want to do.
Okay, but that's
You run your own article.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Well, you are doing it.
And direct this little movie.
And direct this little movie. And I'll just sit here and I'll collect my big fee at the end of it.
All right.
And move on.
Pretentious? Moi? How cruel Harris could be. Back in 1987, I probably was lost a little up my own aesthetic, at least in the sense that I was rooted in the arts, new to interviewing, had been Ireland's first writer-in-residence at a vocational school, taught adults creative writing, wrote a stage column, and was so besotted by, say, the works of Tennessee Williams that in my first article I quoted his definition of the fugitive kind: those who continue to ask the questions that haunt the hearts of people, rather than accept prescribed answers that aren't really answers at all. And this was my statement of intent even before I became an interviewer. It don't get more pretentious than that, right? Wrong, it do, and I was. From the start, I also tended to structure my Q&A interviews as if they were plays, complete with conflict at least at the start. So to me, this interview was a play. To Harris, it was a movie, meaning we were off to a fab start. Would it be fair to say that in some interviews, as with Jonathan Ross last weekend, you use anecdotes to avoid revealing too much about yourself, and you speak more for effect than in truth?
Well, I'll tell you what happens. Sometimes you have to cut the cloth according to the suit. There are interviews like Jonathan Ross that don't want to get into anything of any great depth. I mean, you saw what happened. I mean, I was barely on, and you're off.
That's right.
I'm a sort of a great friend of Johnny Carson's in America. And I used to do the Johnny Carson show, and he'd always come into your dressing room before airing time and say, "Keep it funny, keep it funny." So one gets used to one gets used to that, and I suppose the old format of telling jokes or telling stories seems to be what they really want. I mean, it's been conditioned by their requirements more than anything else. I have no particular fear of getting down and discussing my private life, providing that it's a part of my private life that should be made public. But I don't necessarily believe what you might be hinting at, that because one makes one's living from the public, they're entitled to know and devour your private life. I mean, I believe that they're entitled to a good performance. If you're going to do Macbeth, they're entitled to a good Macbeth. They're entitled to a good performance. That's all they're entitled to. What you give them after that is something else.